In section 1 we worked the right front. In section 2 we worked the right back. In section 3 we worked the right side, which connected the back to the front. And in our section 4 we're going to close the side seam and place the sleeve stitches that are at the center of the row on hold. This section is represented only with this one purl ridge here, because it is a rather short section, but it is a very important one. It closes the side seam here with a 3-needle bind off, but before that we're going to work a few rows here at what was the end of section 3 and also at the beginning of the row of the right side row of section 3, and that makes a little space here at the underarm, so a couple extra rows here at the underarm before we then close the sides with a 3-needle bind off. And those extra rows here create a bit more space here for the sleeve and just make for a better fit and like easier movement for the sleeve. This kind of corresponds to what you would have in a top-down sweater where you cast on stitches at the underarm. So our extra rows kind of do the same thing here. And the sleeve stitches that we place on hold are the same number of stitches, kind of from the center of the row where we have the stitch markers. You have half stitches of the sleeve stitches are before the center stitch marker, and the center stitch plus the other half are on the other side of the center marker, and we're going to place them all on hold to work later after we close the side seam. So the center stitches will be placed on hold, and then we work some extra rows here at the beginning and here at the end, and then bind off the stitches. So for that, you kind of need to know how many sleeve stitches you're going to place on hold, and obviously the pattern is going to tell you that. In the setup row, in the first setup row, for the extra rows at the beginning, so the beginning of the right side row is where we're going to place everything on hold that we're not going to need anymore. So for that, you're going to want to have a length of waist yarn ready that you can place your stitches on. But first we're going to work as the pattern says, or as established, all stitches that will be worked for our extra side rows at the beginning. So this is the last stitch that I'm going to work for my extra side rows. And just like we had in all the other sections, because it's the last stitch, I'm going to knit that last stitch. I'm going to slide them off to the kind of the end of the needle or off the needle now, because I'm going to now place the center stitches that will be the sleeve stitches on hold. Just to make sure I don't drop anything, I've slid them down the needle a bit. So to place the sleeve stitches on hold, I usually grab a length of waist yarn. I like to go with something contrasting just to make it easier for me to see. And I usually have just like little odds and ends in my knitter's toolbox. And I'm going to place this length of waist yarn on a needle. And with that needle, I'm going to use that and thread all those stitches up to the marker on it. And I'm going to count the stitches to make sure that I have the same number before and after the marker. I'm going to also slip the marker on hold because I'm going to need that after I pick up the stitches again and work the sleeves. And then I'm going to slip the center stitch and then the same number I had before the stitch marker. And again, the number of stitches are in your pattern. So let's see, I had 8 before the marker, and then the center stitch, and then another 8. So that's the correct number for my tiny little sleeve here, and then I just pull this length of waste yarn through, and I usually secure it with like a knot or something, just to make sure those stitches can't really go anywhere. So I'm just going to make a knot here, and what you see here is that those are the stitches that we worked at the beginning of the row. Our working yarn is still attached here. Then the middle stitches are placed on hold for the sleeve, and these will be worked again in a moment, but we're not needing them right now. So what I do is I pull the needle through and slide the stitches to the cable, and they're now on hold on the cable, and I can turn around and continue working where my working yarn is still attached with a wrong side row. So that is the setup row on the wrong side for the extra rows at the beginning. And I'm going to work as established. I'm starting with a purl 1 edge stitch, and then I'm just going to work kind of as established the pattern. Okay, so again you would then work rows here, just this little part of the sweater, to add some length here, and when you're finished you break the yarn. So this is the extra rows at the beginning finished. I break the yarn, and I'm going to slip all those stitches back onto my right hand needle, because those are not worked anymore now, so those are going to be placed on hold now after I finished this side of the work. So I've slipped them to the right hand needle, and then I'm sliding them to the cable, and then I'm picking up the other stitches on the other side of the sleeves, and then I'm bringing them back to the left hand needle. And then I work the same number of rows that I worked here at the beginning. I'm working them here at the end of the row as well. So I'm going to reattach my yarn here, and I'm going to work this exact same number of rows here that I had on the other side. When you finish the right side rows at the end of the work, you turn around, and what you can see now is you have the same number of worked here, extra rows here, as you have on the other side. And I'm now bringing the stitches that are parked here from the beginning of the row back to the right hand needle, and I'm going to bind them off together with a 3-needle bind off. And what a 3-needle bind off does in this case is it binds off all our stitches, and it closes the side seam without us actually having to do any seaming. So to that, we're going to work the 3-needle bind off on the wrong side, which means we have to bring our right sides together and the needle tips on the same side. The working yarn is going to be attached to the back here. So you hold those 2 needles parallel to each other with the right sides facing each other and the wrong sides facing out. These stitches here that are on hold are our sleeve stitches, and we bind them off with a 3-needle bind off. And as the name suggests, you're going to need a 3rd needle for this one here, and I suggest going with a needle size that is either the same or very close to your main needle size. If you're a super tight knitter, you might want to go up a needle size. For the 3-needle bind off, I knit 1 stitch off the front needle together with 1 stitch off the back needle. and do the same again. Next stitch, and then I pass the first stitch over the second and off the needles, and I repeat that across all stitches. So knit one stitch off the front needle together with one stitch of the back needle and pass the stitch over. If you're an English style knitter, you're still going to knit one stitch off the front needle together with one stitch of the back needle, and it should look a little like this. Then pass the first stitch over the second. If you're afraid of dropping that stitch here, you can leave your finger here and push that stitch to the other side to make sure it's not dropped. And you repeat that until there are no more stitches left on your left hand needles. So when there is only one stitch left here on my right hand needle, no stitches on the left hand needle, I break the yarn. And then you pull that tail end through the last stitch. And then you pull to tighten and secure it. And that is our 3 needle bind off on the wrong side. And when we turn it around to the right side, it looks like this. If you pull a little, you can see the knit stitches here, but usually the fabric kind of pulls itself together and it's going to be almost invisible here. So if you pull apart, you're going to see the bind off, but it shouldn't be visible when you wear the sweater later. And ideally your pattern is going to meet up and match here at the bind off, just like we have here at the top of the shoulders. So it's going to be an all over pattern. So this is half of our sweater finished. It looks a little wonky. So this is half of the sweater. There's going to be a sleeve worked here in the middle. We're going to work the other half of the sweater in this direction, and afterwards we're going to add a hemline, a wide band of 2x2 ribbing, and we're also going to finish off our neckline on top here. But that is section 4 finished.